You know what's fascinating about Greek mythology? It offers us characters so complex and intriguing that they continue to haunt our collective imagination thousands of years later. And among all these characters, there's one who particularly stands out: Medusa. But wait, you think you know her story? You'll see that everything you think you know about this famous Gorgon might just be a small part of a much richer and more surprising narrative. Today, we're going to discover together how this woman with snakes for hair went from a simple petrifying monster to a true modern feminist symbol. Stay until the end, because I promise you'll never look at Medusa the same way again. And you'll understand why even Versace chose her face as their brand logo. Let's start from the beginning. To truly understand Medusa, we need to dive into the complex family tree of Greek mythology. Medusa is the granddaughter of Pontus and Gaia, and the daughter of Phorcys and Keto, two primordial deities of the ocean depths. She's part of the three Gorgon sisters, along with Theno and Euryale. Ancient authors place the dwelling of these three creatures in the far west, near the realm of the dead, which wasn't exactly reassuring for the local inhabitants. But here's the crucial detail. Unlike her two immortal sisters, Medusa was mortal. This particularity, which might seem trivial, is actually the key to her entire story. Why was she alone mortal? Ancient myths don't give a clear explanation, but this vulnerability made her different, more human in a way. During the Archaic period, from the 8th to the early 5th century BCE, the Gorgonian appeared on temple pediments and antefixes, on statues and pottery. She was represented with a large round face, a beard, tusks or fangs, wings, and of course those famous serpents that replace her hair. On the roofs of Greek and Etruscan temples, her monstrous figure was used as an antefix to control and protect sacred buildings. She was the kind of creature you absolutely didn't want to encounter around a corner, especially since her gaze instantly transformed anyone who looked at her into a stone statue. Handy for decorating your garden, much less so for maintaining a balanced social life. The ancient iconography of Medusa is fascinating for its richness and evolution. Progressively, the Gorgonian would lose its grotesque and terrifying aspect, while keeping the protruding tongue and visible teeth. The beard disappears, and the serpents change into curls. The figure could take on the appearance of a beautiful young woman. This artistic transformation reflects the evolution and understanding of the character. From pure monster, she progressively becomes a more complex and nuanced figure. Greek artists used Medusa's image very creatively. On drinking cups, once the wine was drunk, Medusa's head would appear, and on the outside, large eyes that covered the drinker's face when they emptied their cup. Imagine the surprise of guests at a banquet. This playful use shows that Medusa wasn't just a figure of terror, but also an element of surprise, and perhaps even amusement in Greek culture. But this is where things get interesting. The best-known version of her story comes from Ovid in his Metamorphoses. According to this account, Medusa was originally a priestess of Athena, of exceptional beauty with magnificent golden hair. She served in the temple of the virgin goddess when Poseidon, the god of the seas, raped her in that same sacred temple. And here, hold on tight. Instead of punishing the aggressor, Athena punished the victim. She transformed Medusa into a hideous monster, replacing her beautiful hair with venomous serpents. This transformation was supposed to be protection, so that no man could ever approach her again. But we can legitimately wonder if this protection didn't look more like a double punishment for a woman who had done nothing wrong. This version by Ovid, written much later than the first Greek accounts, completely changed the perception of Medusa. She was no longer simply a monster born monstrous, but a woman transformed by violence and injustice. It's this nuance that will make all the difference in the evolution of her symbolism through the centuries. Greek artists from the classical and Hellenistic periods had already begun to represent Medusa with a more human, more beautiful face, already showing this evolution in understanding of the character. But before continuing, allow me a small pause. If this exploration of myths fascinates you as much as it does me, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel and activate the little bell. It helps me enormously to continue offering you this kind of content, and you'll be the first informed of my upcoming videos. Thanks in advance for your support. Let's continue. But before going further, I absolutely must tell you the complete story of Perseus, because it's an incredibly rich tale that deserves our attention. Perseus is the son of Danae, daughter of the king of Argos, Acrisius. The latter, warned by an oracle that his grandson would kill him, locks his daughter in a bronze tower, thinking to avoid the prophecy. But he didn't count on Zeus, who managed to seduce Danae in the form of a golden rain. Perseus is thus born in secret, but when Acrisius discovers the child's existence, he makes a draconian decision. He locks his daughter and grandson in a chest that he throws into the sea. Fortunately for our story, the waves carry the chest to the island of Seriphus, where they are rescued by a fisherman named Dictys. He raises the boy as his own son. But then, Polydectes, the king of the island and Dictys's brother, falls in love with Danae. Problem: the young woman rejects his advances, protected by her son, who has become a strong and brave young man. Annoyed by this resistance and stung in his pride, Polydectes imagines a diabolical stratagem to get rid of Perseus. He organizes a banquet where each guest must bring a gift. Perseus, who has nothing to offer, boasts that he can bring anything to the king. Polydectes seizes the opportunity and asks him for Medusa's head, thinking to send the young man to certain death. After all, who could survive a confrontation with the Gorgon? But Perseus is lucky. He attracts the attention of the gods. Hermes and Athena decide to help him in his quest. They first send him to find the Graeae, three sisters who share a single eye and a single tooth. These old women know the way to the nymphs, who possess the magical objects necessary to defeat Medusa. Perseus manages to temporarily steal their eye and tooth, forcing them to reveal the information. The nymphs of the Styx then offer Perseus equipment worthy of a science fiction hero: winged sandals to fly, an invisibility helmet belonging to Hades, and a magical bag capable of containing anything, even Medusa's head. Hermes gives him an unbreakable sword, and Athena lends him her bronze shield, polished like a mirror. Thanks to the winged sandals, Perseus reaches the shores of Ocean, where the Gorgons reside. Hermes and Athena accompany him and recommend that he never look directly at Medusa. The hero arrives at the place where the three sisters sleep. Stheno and Euryale are immortal, but Medusa can be killed. Perseus uses Athena's shield as a mirror to see Medusa's reflection without meeting her gaze. With a precise sword stroke, he cuts off the sleeping Gorgon's head. But the story doesn't end there. From Medusa's blood spring two extraordinary creatures: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant warrior. These posthumous births show that even in death, Medusa continued to give birth to marvelous beings. Perseus quickly places the head in the magical bag because even dead, it retains its petrifying power. Medusa's two sisters wake up and chase Perseus, but thanks to the invisibility helmet and winged sandals, he escapes them. Then begins a return journey fraught with obstacles. Flying over Ethiopia, Perseus discovers Princess Andromeda chained to a rock. offered as sacrifice to a sea monster to appease Poseidon's anger. Seduced by her beauty, Perseus uses Medusa's head to petrify the monster and free the princess, whom he marries. On the way back, the story tells that Perseus stops to rest with Atlas, the titan who carries the world on his shoulders. But Atlas, who had received a prophecy that a son of Zeus would steal the golden apples from his garden, refuses hospitality to Perseus. Vexed by this affront, the hero takes out Medusa's head and transforms Atlas into a mountain. This is how, according to mythology, the Atlas Mountains were born. Back in Seriphos, Perseus discovers that his mother and Dictys had to take refuge in a temple to escape Polydectes' persecutions. Furious, the hero goes to the palace, where the king is celebrating what he believes to be Perseus' death. When Polydectes and his court see the hero arrive, they refuse to believe he has really killed Medusa. Perseus proves otherwise by taking out the Gorgon's head, instantly petrifying the king and all his accomplices. After this revenge, Perseus offers Medusa's head to Athena as a sign of gratitude. The goddess places it on her aegis, that magical shield, which becomes one of her most recognizable attributes. Even after Medusa's death, her head continues to serve as weapon and protection, now adorning the equipment of the goddess of war and wisdom. This complete story of Perseus reveals several fascinating aspects of Medusa's mythology. It first shows that her death wasn't an end, but a transformation. Her blood gives birth to legendary creatures, her head retains its power, and her image becomes a symbol of divine protection. It also reveals the complexity of relationships between mortals and immortals in Greek mythology, where gods intervene directly in human affairs. In ancient art, Medusa was mainly used as an apotropaic symbol, that is, a protective talisman against evil. Her image was engraved on warriors' shields, amulets, jewelry, and even buildings. The principle was simple: use the image of evil to repel evil. A sort of eye for an eye mythological version. Greeks placed Medusa heads on their doors, temples, and tombs, convinced that her petrifying gaze would protect their property and loved ones from bad intentions. The use of the Gorgonean in Greek art is extraordinarily rich iconographically. From the mid-5th century onwards, it's most often found as ornament on Athena's aegis, as well as on vases, plates and coins of numerous Greek cities. It was used as door decoration and was very common in decorative arts. But what's particularly interesting is how Greek artists integrated Medusa's image into their daily creations. Take the famous Greek vases. Artists created cups where, once the wine was drunk, Medusa's head appeared at the bottom. Imagine the drinker's surprise. But there was something even more subtle. On the outside of these cups, large painted eyes sometimes covered the drinker's face when they emptied their cup. This playful and interactive use of Medusa's image shows a much more nuanced approach than simple terror. Greeks knew how to play with symbols, subvert them, humanize them. We also find Medusa on amphoras, where she was often represented at the moment of her decapitation by Perseus. These narrative scenes allowed artists to explore not only the terrifying aspect of the character, but also her tragic dimension. Some of these representations show Medusa with an almost human face, expressing suffering rather than simple monstrosity. Greek temples offer us some of the most impressive representations of Medusa. The two best-known representations of Medusa killed by Perseus are found on two temples dedicated to Artemis, those of Selinunte and Corfu. These monumental architectural works show the importance Greeks accorded to this mythological figure. On these pediments, Medusa isn't just decorative. She's integrated into a complex iconographic program that links mythology, religion, and protection of the city. This artistic evolution of Medusa's representation tells us much about the evolution of mythological understanding of the character. From the archaic monster with crude features, she progressively becomes a more human, more complex figure. This artistic transformation precedes and announces the literary and philosophical reinterpretations that would come later. Over the centuries, Medusa's figure has evolved spectacularly. During the Renaissance, artists like Caravaggio or Benvenuto Cellini began to explore the tragic dimension of the character. They often represented her at the moment of her death, with an expression mixing suffering and beauty. These works marked a turning point. Medusa was no longer just a monster, but a victim worthy of compassion. 20th century psychoanalysts, particularly Freud, gave a new interpretation to Medusa. For them, she symbolized masculine fear of castration and female sexuality. Her serpents represented female genitalia, and her petrifying power symbolized the terror that women could inspire in men. This psychoanalytic reading, though largely questioned today, nevertheless influenced 20th century art and literature. But it's truly with the feminist movement that Medusa experienced her greatest symbolic transformation. Contemporary feminists have reclaimed her image as a symbol of female anger, resistance, and empowerment. For them, Medusa represents all women who have been silenced, punished for crimes they didn't commit, transformed into monsters by patriarchal society. Her petrifying gaze is no longer seen as a curse, but as a power of defense against male oppression. This feminist reappropriation of Medusa is particularly visible in contemporary art. Artists like Luciano Garbati have created sculptures where Medusa proudly holds Perseus's head, completely reversing the traditional power dynamic. These works question who is really the monster in the story, the woman who defends herself or the man who attacks her. Let's now talk about Medusa's presence in modern popular culture. She has invaded our screens, gaming consoles, and libraries. In cinema, she appears in films like Clash of the Titans from 1981 and its 2010 remake, where she's presented as a particularly impressive final boss. The 1981 film with Ray Harryhausen's special effects remains a classic of the genre, showing a terrifying but also strangely fascinating Medusa. In video games, Medusa has become a recurring character. We find her in the God of War series, where she constitutes a formidable adversary for Kratos. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, she appears as one of the mythological creatures the player must face. These video game representations often emphasize her monstrous aspect and devastating power, perpetuating the traditional image of the Gorgon. Contemporary literature has also widely exploited the character. Novels like The Gorgon's Gaze by Julia Golding or Medusa Girls by Tara Lynn Childs offer modern reinterpretations of the myth. These works often explore themes of identity, difference, and self-acceptance, using Medusa as a metaphor for teenagers who feel different or rejected by society. But the most surprising appropriation of Medusa in popular culture remains probably her use by the fashion house Versace. Gianni Versace chose Medusa's face as his brand's logo, explaining that he wanted to create a symbol that would make people fall in love with the brand with no possibility of return, exactly like the Gorgon's petrifying gaze. This commercial use of Medusa shows how much her image has detached from its mythological origins to become a symbol of power and seduction. Fashion isn't the only domain where Medusa has found her place. In architecture, her image continues to adorn numerous buildings, from church facades to museum pediments. In Paris, we can see Medusa heads on the observatory fountain or on the facade of the Opera Garnier. These architectural uses perpetuate her original protective function, while adding an aesthetic dimension to our urban spaces. Music has also embraced Medusa's figure. Metal bands like Medusa or Gorgon have chosen this name to express their power and dark side. In classical music, composers like Lully or Rameau have composed operas on the theme of Medusa, exploring the tragic dimensions of the character. More recently, artists like Grimes or FKA Twigs have used Medusa imagery in their videos, mixing ancient mythology and futuristic aesthetics. What's fascinating is seeing how each era has projected its own concerns onto Medusa's character. Antiquity saw her as a monster to fear and a protective talisman. The Renaissance explored her tragic and artistic dimension. The 20th century psychoanalyzed her. And our contemporary era has made her a symbol of female empowerment and resistance to oppression. This constant evolution of Medusa's symbolism tells us as much about our societies as about the myth itself. It reveals our collective fears, aspirations, and struggles. When women fight for their rights, Medusa becomes a symbol of resistance. When society questions sexual violence, she becomes a victim to defend. When art explores the boundaries between beauty and horror, she becomes a complex and ambivalent muse. It's also interesting to note that Medusa remains one of the rare mythological characters to have kept such symbolic force through millennia. While other figures from Greek mythology have become simple cultural references, Medusa continues to evolve, transform, and question us. She refuses to be petrified by time, if I may say so. In our contemporary world, where questions of consent, violence against women, and gender equality are more relevant than ever, Medusa finds new youth. She perfectly embodies those women who refuse to be victimized, who transform their suffering into strength and their anger into power. Her petrifying gaze is no longer a curse, but a warning. Be careful not to underestimate the strength of those you've tried to destroy. Social media have also participated in this renaissance of Medusa. We see Instagram accounts flourishing dedicated to art inspired by the Gorgon, hashtags like #MedusaEnergy, celebrating female strength, and memes that humorously subvert her image. This democratization of her symbol shows that she no longer belongs only to cultural elites, but is part of our daily collective imagination. What makes Medusa so fascinating is also her ability to embody the contradictions of the human condition. She is simultaneously victim and executioner, beautiful and monstrous, protective and destructive. These paradoxes make her a character of inexhaustible symbolic richness, capable of speaking to each generation about its own questionings. By analyzing her evolution through the centuries, we realize that Medusa was never really a one-dimensional monster. From antiquity, she carried within her this ambivalence that made her so captivating. The Greeks themselves knew she was different from her immortal sisters, that she had this humanity that made her both more vulnerable and more powerful. Today, when we look at Medusa, we no longer see just a mythological creature from another time. We see a mirror of our own struggles, fears, and hopes. She reminds us that behind every monster often hides a story of suffering, and that behind every victim can be born a formidable force. That's why Medusa continues to fascinate us after so many centuries. She's not just a character from ancient mythology, but a living symbol that evolves with us, that questions and inspires us. From Greek pottery to fashion runways, from Renaissance frescoes to Hollywood films, she crosses eras by constantly reinventing herself. So the next time you encounter her image, whether on jewelry, in a film, or in a work of art, remember this incredible odyssey. Remember that you're not just looking at a mythological monster, but one of the most complex and evolutionary figures in our cultural heritage. A woman who, despite all the injustices suffered, managed to transform her curse into power, and her deadly gaze into a symbol of hope for all those who refuse to be petrified by adversity. And who knows? Maybe in a few decades, new generations will discover still other facets of Medusa, other ways to interpret and appropriate her. After all, that's the beauty of myths. They never really die. They transform and are reborn endlessly, like the serpents of her hair that renew themselves permanently. Thank you for following this exploration of Medusa's fascinating universe. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to share it, like it, and tell me in the comments which aspect of the character struck you most. Are there other mythological figures whose evolution you'd like me to tell you about? See you in the comments to discuss it, and see you very soon for a new dive into the mysteries of mythology.